Chronos Before the Ashes is a reworked title from the 2016 VR exclusive Chronos. This re-release has been slightly revamped and now takes place in the Remnant from the Ashes universe, serving as a prequel. For those unaware, Remnant is a shoot-'em-up semi-Souls-like that came out to fairly positive reception over a year ago. I didn't play it too much due to its heavy multiplayer focus because I'm a bit of a loner dork, so when it comes to the shared lore between the two games, this review won't delve into it. Similarly, I didn't play the original VR release of Chronos, so this video also won't spend time detailing where it diverges. I am coming at this with fresh eyes, and this video is obviously going to reflect that. I am just getting that out of the way now, so if people are coming into this hoping to learn about those aspects, you now know not to sit there and wait with bated breath. Though please don't leave. Come back. I promise this will still be an enjoyable review.
Come. Sit. Listen all. Listen well.
I hate to say it, but I don't love this game. And they're gone. As anyone who watches my Twitch streams knows, I was looking forward to it. It's been on my scroll bar of anticipated titles for a little while now, but very early into my first playthrough I found myself annoyed and fun was at a minimum. Something about it just never clicked with me, and not on a difficulty level, mind you. As I do most reviews, I platinum the damn thing, including playing my first of 2 playthroughs on the hardest difficulty setting, so my dislike isn't due to it being too challenging or anything. I got through it mostly fine. I just don't like how it controls. There's a slow, sluggish weightiness to each movement and action, and it felt more clunky than anything. I don't believe it actually is clunky, it's clearly playing as the developers intended. I just never jived with its movement pace. Perhaps it's because I'm coming off also platinuming the PS5 remake of Demon's Souls, a game which felt super responsive and slick, and this just felt off to me because of it. But even then, after 15 plus hours of play and 2 whole playthroughs, I should have acclimated to it, as I do many other games, so I can't even say for certain if Demon's Souls is to blame here. I guess I don't fully know what it is, but I never shook the sense that every button press was delayed, as if I was playing on a Google Stadia, not a downloaded console title. The slow as molasses sensation also shows itself in basic tasks. Healing takes forever, and with enemies who non-stop press towards you, there is rarely a good moment to do so. Even opening doors is met with an animation where both weapons are put away before the slabs of wood are pushed inwards. It's just so slow. Throw in at times broken camera as well as a lock-on system that annoyingly offsets the view, and I just didn't like the fighting. And once again, as most people know, probably due to my constant humble bragging, I've already done it twice in this video, I'm typically really fond of games like this, and I'm pretty damn good at them. This shit is right up my alley, but Chronos Before the Ashes might be my least favorite of them all. Although, maybe comparing it to other Souls-likes is incorrect, as it's not quite that. Many game journalists and critics are going to falsely label it as such, but while it has some elements of a Souls game, mainly with how its combat plays out, especially given its control scheme, the game is missing what I believe to be a core element of any game within that genre. You don't drop anything when you die. There is no heading back to where you last perished to pick up lost experience. However, for those accustomed to games of this sort, one interesting design choice is that unlike an Estus Flask or similar healing item, this title strips that away. You have something called Dragon Hearts, and a max of 4 can be found throughout the experience, but these don't refill when you fast travel or activate a spawn stone. Once used, they are useless until you die again. To make up for this, every time you level up, your health bar refills, so it becomes a strategy of sorts to not use your healing items and to instead kill as many enemies as you can. This is because you level up on the spot. Souls comparisons aside, as well as my nitpicks as to why it's not a Souls-like, what Chronos is best defined as is an action puzzler because outside of the fights are a good number of puzzles. Few are overly complex, but they actually serve the game more than one might think. Without providing details that will ruin solutions, some involve combining items to make something else, working through a series of sliding slabs of stone, or being observant enough to catch the code to a magic mirror. What I appreciate here is that the game doesn't hold the player's hand and actually forces them to solve things themselves. In that sense, it is a welcome breath of fresh air. This is an era, after all, where countless games hand out solutions like a failed reality TV star hands out STDs. Further setting this game apart from other Souls-likes are difficulty levels. There's 3 options here. Casual, which is the easiest, Adventure, which promises a more balanced way to play, and Heroic, which as the description reads is the purest form of the game. The latter was tough in some places, with the final boss giving me the most challenge, but ultimately I got through it relatively quickly. Although I did die enough times to reach age 80, which brings me straight into this title's coolest mechanic, one I desperately wish I was able to appreciate more than I did. You see, in Chronos, every time you die, you age 1 year. This is reflected both in how your character appears and in how the character is permitted to level up. Grow too old and strength and agility start to cost more experience points, with them eventually becoming completely locked. Vitality also starts to cost more, although even at the max age of 80 it can still be raised, it just requires the player to bank more experience. In concept, this is a phenomenal idea, but it doesn't commit to it enough, or maybe more correctly, there's not enough mechanics to play off of it with. This is most evident in the Arcane system, because while strength, agility, and vitality start to cost extra, the Arcane stat becomes cheaper, eventually becoming the only viable thing to level up. But there's not much to do with it. You don't learn any spells in the game, there's no magic to throw or anything to cast. Instead, Arcane takes effect when you parry or perfectly dodge. It's in these moments you snag a quick second to pull off a charged weapon attack, and Arcane will increase the damage it does, but that's about it. Technically, there's also 4 Dragon Stones that can be found throughout the world, and these imbue you with various perks depending on which ones you use, and Arcane also strengthens their damage output, but their use is limited as a bar must first be filled, and if you go into a boss fight without having first killed enemies to fill it up, it won't be usable during that fight because it fills too slowly during these larger battles. A good strategy is to kill a few things before taking on a boss, but even then it's a one-use thing, and at best it gives you a handful of seconds to fill your health or hurt the boss for a bit extra. I really only found I relied on it for the final fight of the game. But Dragonstones aside, which still works well even with a very low Arcane level, I really think the game would have benefited from having learned spells. And while I don't want to criticize the game too much for not being what I want it to be in my head, I have to stress that the age mechanic ultimately feels useless. Even at age 80, it's still a sword and shield slasher, and I personally believe it had been really cool if the game began as that, but if the more you died, the more you were forced to change your entire playstyle to accommodate a slower movement speed by using distance spells or whatever. Make the age a core aspect of the gameplay. At best, it's kinda superficial here. One thing I did like with the system is that beginning at age 20, every decade the player can choose one trait from a list of options to help boost their skills. For my first playthrough where my character reached age 80 as well as the level 70 level cap, I had bonuses which increased my evade window, gave me extra defense, and extra vitality. In total, one can choose up to 6 traits, as at age 80, the only option available is immortality, and I'm not really counting that here. The immortality just means every time you die, you can continue playing, but you won't age to age 81. It's the game's way of avoiding a permanent game over. Backtracking a bit to the level up system, it was during my second playthrough when I was going after the trophy that required me to die no more than 4 times that I also discovered how pointless some of the stats ultimately are. I did nothing but tank my agility, and using a weapon which scaled with that stat, I was able to rush through the game massacring nearly everything. It may have helped that at this point I had the evade timings nailed down, but it is worth mentioning. A commendable aspect of the game is that it ran pretty well. With the exception of the previously mentioned wonky camera, I experienced minimal glitches or bugs. It's a PS4 title, but I was playing on a PS5, so I don't know how much of a difference that made, but it was smooth traveling. On a purely aesthetic level, this one is a bit weird. You begin the game at a character customization screen which permits the most minimal of options, really just choosing a gender and a weapon, and then you're thrust into the modern world. Your character has a fantasy appearance, sword and shield and all, yet you travel through elevators and interact with computers, only to then travel to a mystical fantasy realm. It almost has a Playmobil Castle vibe to the art design, and the clash of styles at first is certainly jarring, but it did grow on me after a time. The only level I didn't much appreciate is a labyrinth world of sorts, and this gave me heavy flashbacks to some Darksiders 3 DLC which wasn't very good. The same studio made it, and there's very obvious asset flipping taking place, although this game released first because it was in VR form in 2016, so I suppose Darksiders 3 is the one who should receive the asset flipping scorn in this instance.
This isn't my world. Disappointed!
A favorite part of the game for me is one of the most short-lived moments. It's a spot where you shrink really small to get an item from within a locked bookshelf. And as mentioned months ago in my Metamorphosis review, I have a soft spot for perspectives like this, and I wish Chronos had more of it. I don't know what it is, but the shit is so cool to me. Perhaps I watched Honey, I Shrunk the Kids one too many times when I was younger. I also think I made that same joke in my Metamorphosis review. Fucking sue me. When not solving puzzles or becoming tiny, the main goal of the game is to work your way towards a dragon. This serves as the final boss, and you're given the goal almost right away, so mentioning it is hardly a spoiler. On your way towards this goal, you'll fight 5 other behemoths, and while a couple do seem imposing at first, they all have extremely limited movesets, and once learned, it was really easy to goad them into during the attacks, which left them with the biggest openings. One of them can also have their health permanently cut in half if the player finds and interacts with something in a completely different level. This though I liked, as it ultimately played into the ending of the game, but to say more would be to delve into spoilers, so we'll move on. Speaking of which, maybe here's a good segue to bring up the story. There's not a whole lot of it, unless you go out of your way to read various texts hidden throughout the world. The ending is also super cliche. I won't compare it to any games, as that'd completely give away what the ending is, but I think I've seen a vital plot twist a bajillion times. And honestly, I guess that's mostly it. It's not a completely terrible game. There's certainly worse ones I've played this year, but it's not one I hold much love for either. As said early on, it just didn't click for me. I don't like how the combat felt. I do give the devs some respect for creating a really cool gimmick with the age system, but it needed way more commitment and a heavier reliance on Arcane. If there's ever a sequel, I hope they deepen the magic system tenfold. As it stands now, I give this outing a 5.5 out of 10. It's decent, and I'm intrigued enough to see where future games may go, but as it stands now, I'm just kinda meh.